Happiness, right? So let's talk, though, about the elusiveness of happiness for any person who's going through a narcissistic relationship, right? So happiness is a big conversation. Everyone's talking happiness, right? It almost seems like an out-of-touch conversation for people who are going through narcissistic relationship. Getting through the day without losing your mind, doubting yourself, losing hours to rumination, that's often considered a reasonable goal. Some survivors will say they actually do have moments of happiness with a child, with a friend, meaningful work or other meaningful activity, maybe a quiet day that goes smoothly, or times that you don't have to be with the narcissistic person. In fact, people go through these relationships get really good at finding happiness in the tiniest little moments. And of course, the most challenging happiness moments are the days that actually go smoothly with the narcissistic person, and you actually relax into it and you feel happy with them, and then boom. Tracking happiness is actually a thing, and there are lots of apps out there that do, apparently hundreds of them. And these are often apps that send you push notifications and track your mood or your happiness level, and may ask you, what are you doing at the time when you get the notification? So if you get enough data, you can start to look for patterns in terms of what you're doing at the times you give yourself higher or lower happiness scores. And I guess, and then maybe whatever you're doing to make you happy, keep doing that, right? Now, for folks who are in narcissistic relationships, this could obviously get a little bit challenging after a while, but it could be useful to see when are your sort of upticks in mood and what does it connect to. And one of the articles I read cited a guy who apparently did this happiness tracking for years, like for every 15 minutes or something like that. And he even tracked where he geographically was each time he tracked his mood, sort of where was he, what was he doing, and it gave him some interesting insight. But it only helped him. It wouldn't help anyone else in the world. Now, most people have to spend a lot of time, most of us have to spend a lot of our time doing things we don't really want to do. Jobs, stuff around the house, sitting in traffic, calls we don't want to have to make, people we don't want to talk to, people we don't want to interact with, folding laundry, emptying cat litter, doing taxes. Now, one could argue that we could be happy in the midst of that. And I could see that. And if we're fortunate, there are more than just 1 or 2 times per day that we're doing the things that we want to do that make us happy. Now, the challenge of being in a toxic relationship is that it is a backbeat to our lives. Something that even when we are not actively managing it, it's always sort of lurking and haunting us. And there may be times that you aren't thinking about it, about the narcissistic relationship, but it's almost like there's something heavy always on your shoulders and you can't fully understand it. And then something comes up to remind you. Maybe it's something on your calendar or something you forgot to do, or a text message or a social media post, or just a memory. So even if you aren't actively dealing with a narcissistic relationship in a given moment or even a given day, you're dealing with it. So can a person who is in a narcissistic relationship or healing from one, even if you're no longer in it, be happy? I mean, obviously the answer to that is yes, but it can seem hard to get to. These relationships can carve us out. It's not a simple heartache or heartbreak. These relationships leave us questioning ourselves in every way. We try our hardest in these relationships, whether they are intimate relationships, family relationships, friendships, workplace relationships, and we just can't get it right. It's a situation that chronically saps our happiness. The short-term sort of triage goal of healing is top of mind for any person who's in a narcissistic relationship. And healing and feeling stabilized again is so important, right? Again, it tends to be the flashes of happiness at best that we might see during these early phases of healing. Now, getting to the more consistent availability of happiness, that takes time, lots of time. And while frankly, I actually do think flashes of happiness are possible. In fact, even likely if you elect to stay in a narcissistic relationship or have to have lots of ongoing contact with a narcissistic person, the less the contact you have with the narcissistic person or narcissistic systems, the more your happiness is probably going to increase. And in fact, your happiness may come from recognizing the contrast between what life was when you had a lot of contact with the narcissistic person and what it is now. Think about coming in from a terribly, terribly hot day into air conditioning, or from a freezing cold day into warmth. You really feel the difference at that point. Or when you eat, when you're very hungry. Or a better example could be to have more money after being broke and living close to the bone for a long time. That there is a deep awareness of the freedoms that come with that money and resource, and oftentimes a very deeply felt appreciation. So maybe that is the happiness superpower of survivors of narcissistic relationships. That after the misery and manipulation of these relationships, the betrayal, the hurt, the vigilance, that when you can breathe again, and laugh loudly without fear, and make mistakes without anxiety, and not have to check in 100 times with a controlling partner, small things then become big things, and you feel comfortable in your skin again. That stuff may mean an appreciation of small and big shifts, and that simple sense of appreciation you're having, folks, that might just be what happiness is. I know the core of my happiness personally has been the recognition of what getting away from narcissistic folks has done for me. And it may also be why I am often at my happiest when I'm alone. You don't need happiness trackers to figure that out. The tough part is getting rid of the narcissistic folks. And I sincerely hope that all of you find a little bit of that happy soon. Thanks again.